We're here today at your first oversight hearing 9 months into your tenure, at a time when hundreds of career prosecutors have quit because they were required to take unethical actions at odds with that promise, or feared that they would have to take such actions if they remained on the job. When over 1,000 former federal prosecutors have sounded the alarm about the unprecedented degree to which the powers of DOJ are being abused to go after the president's enemies. I approach this hearing with a heavy heart. As a former federal prosecutor myself, I served in a department that, whether it was under a Democratic or Republican president, would never use the office to go after the president's enemies or to hide the corruption of his friends. But today, the Justice Department has been used to cover up the possible corruption of the mayor of New York or of a high-level administration official taking $50,000 reportedly in cash in a bag, or a child sex predator who befriended the president and some of his cabinet members. And instead of preventing partisan weaponization, your department has engaged in a brazenly political prosecution at the president's explicit direction. The department has become President Trump's personal sword and shield to go after his ever-growing list of political enemies and to protect himself, his allies, and associates. My questions therefore focus on these two themes: hiding the corrupt acts of his friends and prioritizing the political prosecution of his enemies. So let me start with the shocking allegations of bribery and pay to play. 2 weeks ago, 4 major media outlets reported that Tom Homan, the president's top deportation official working in the White House, took $50,000 in cash in a bag from undercover FBI agents in September 2024, just over a year ago. According to these reports, Homan indicated he would facilitate securing contracts in exchange for money once he was in office in a future Trump administration. Reportedly, this exchange was caught on tape. Rather than pursue this investigation without fear or favor, the department and the FBI under your leadership or that of your predecessor before you confirmed quietly shut it down. Once news broke, your deputy and FBI director issued a joint public statement confirming that the Trump administration closed the investigation. White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt denied Homan took the $50,000, telling a reporter, quote, "Mr. Homan never took the $50,000 that you're referring to, so you should get your facts straight." So today I hope you can help us get our facts straight. Was that true, what the White House Press Secretary said when she denied Homan took the money? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, as I stated earlier, I was not in office. I was not confirmed when that was handled.
So does that
Deputy Attorney General Blanche and Director Patel said that there was no evidence that Tom Homan committed a crime. Yet now you're putting his picture up to slander him.
No, I'm putting his picture up showing an interview he gave with, I think, Fox, in which he was asked explicitly about these allegations that he took a $50,000 bribe, and he refused to answer. He said he didn't answer the question whether he took the money, so I'm asking you the question. Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, I answered that question multiple times. And frankly, you know.
Well, I don't think, with respect, I don't think you did. But in case I just didn't hear you, what is the answer? Did he take the money?
Senator Schiff, that happened prior to my confirmation as Attorney General.
Do you know,
I said that.
Do you know, sitting here, whether he took the money?
All I know is that Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche and FBI Director Patel said there was no case. And Caroline Leavitt is one of the most trustworthy human beings I know.
So
and,
was she,
was she
if
you worked for me, you would have been fired because you were censured by Congress for lying with your
we can stipulate to, you can stipulate to all your personal attacks on the Democratic members of the committee.
Personal attacks? You've been attacking my FBI director. You've been attacking my office. You've been attacking.
But what we're interested in,
borders are.
What we're interested in is the answer to these oversight questions.
You want your,
you were asked by my colleague. You were asked by my colleague.
Attacking good people.
Regular order, Madam Chair, so I can ask a question. You were asked by my colleague from Vermont whether you will support providing a video or audio tape, if it exists, of Mr. Homan taking $50,000 in bribe money from the FBI, will you support a request by this committee to provide that tape or tapes to the committee? Yes or no?
Senator Schiff, you can talk to Director Patel about that.
Well, I'm talking to you about it. You're the Attorney General. This will be your decision. Will you support?
You don't have to tell me what is my decision and what is not
then,
my decision. I said you can talk to Director Patel.
You don't have to try to.
You think you've got a gotcha with Tom Homan, our border czar,
excuse me,
who's been out there fighting for our country since Donald Trump took office.
I'm trying to ask you a question. Regular order, please. And you don't have to defer to the FBI director to pass the buck. So I'm asking you, will you support a request so that the committee, or indeed, I believe the American people should be able to see that video or audio tape? Will you support that request?
Will you apologize to Donald Trump for trying to impeach him?
I guess the answer is you won't support that request.
After you now know that Joe Biden tried to cover up Hunter Biden's involvement with Ukraine.
Excuse me. Let me do this, because I think it's valuable that the American people get a sense of what you've refused to answer today. So these are just some of the questions you refused to answer, or have answered with personal attacks on members of this committee. You were asked whether you consulted with career ethics lawyers, as you promised you would do during your nomination hearing, when you approved the president receiving a $400 million gift from the Qataris. You refused to answer that question. You were asked who or what role you may have played, or who played the role in asking that Trump's name be flagged in any of the Epstein documents gathered by the FBI. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Homan kept the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether Homan paid taxes on the $50,000 bribe money. You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did career prosecutors find insufficient evidence to charge James Comey? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, how are military strikes on these boats in the Caribbean legal? And you refused to even answer that question.
You were asked, a law degree,
excuse me. You were asked, did you discuss indicting James Comey with the president? You refused to answer that question. You were asked, did you approve the firing of antitrust lawyers who disagreed with the Hewlett-Packard merger? You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you support a restoration fund for violent insurrections to attack the Capitol on January 6th. You refused to answer that question. You were asked whether you were firing career professionals, career prosecutors, just because they worked on January 6th investigations. You refused to answer that question. You were asked by my California colleague whether you believe government officials, like immigration officials, have to abide by court orders. You wouldn't even answer that question. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing.
Oversight?
Excuse me, you can attack me after my time is over.
You've attacked all of us, including President Trump, for your entire career.
You can attack me later, and I know you've got plenty of canned attacks. We've heard them all day to day.
Canned attacks on you?
This is supposed to be...
No one needs a canned attack on you.
Regular order, Madam Chair. I'm trying to speak. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing of the Justice Department. And it comes in the wake of an indictment called for by the president of one of his enemies. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing, and it comes in the wake of revelations that a top administration official took $50,000 in a bag, and this department made that investigation go away. This is supposed to be an oversight hearing when dozens of prosecutors have been fired simply because they worked on cases investigating the former president. This is, and now the current president.
What about the fires in California? Do you care about that, Senator Schiff?
This is supposed to be an oversight hearing in which members of Congress can get serious answers to serious questions about
the riots in LA serious?
About the cover-up of corruption, about the prosecution of the president's enemies. And
I think you owe the president an apology.
When will it be
frankly,
that the members of this committee on a bipartisan basis demand answers to those questions and refuse to accept
Clearly you're a failed lawyer because you don't understand when someone can and cannot answer a question.
Refuse to accept personal slander as an answer to those questions.
Personal slander?
With
will
that,
you apologize
Madam Chair,
to Donald Trump
back.
for slandering him? Personal slander.
Senator
may I ask unanimous consent, Madam Chair, to introduce into the record the statement of 1,000 former Justice Department officials who warned that the Comey indictment is a democracy-threatening abuse of power. May I also request unanimous consent for the introduction to the record of 282 former career officials at the Justice Department raising an alarm who were voluntarily or involuntarily forced to leave the department because of improper actions taken by the Department of Justice. May I introduce with unanimous consent the Justice Department manual that talks about when initiating and declining charges are subject to impermissible considerations. And finally, Madam Chair, may I introduce the letter for Michael Ben-Ari, a career counterterrorism prosecutor, DOJ, a letter he nailed to his door, which concludes by urging officials to do the right thing for the right reasons, to follow the facts and the law, and raises the alarm that the decision to remove experienced career officials from U.S. attorneys' offices, the FBI, and critical parts of DOJ undermines our country's abilities to counter terrorist organizations, malign nation-state actors, and countless others that seek to harm our nation and its citizens. And he believes that the priority is prosecuting the president's enemies rather than protecting the country.
One moment.
May I have unanimous consent to enter these into the record?
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield back.
During a Senate confirmation hearing for Attorney General nominee Pam Bondi, that will be remembered as a turning point in the slow-motion collapse of congressional oversight, Senator Adam Schiff rose with a gravity so rare in today's performative politics that the chamber itself seemed to fall silent. He did not come to grandstand or score cheap points. He came to sound an alarm about the death of accountability itself. What had unfolded the previous day was not merely discourteous. It was an act of open defiance against the very idea that the executive branch must answer to the people's representatives. Democrats had asked three meticulously focused, entirely legitimate oversight questions. First, what was the precise legal basis for federal agents rappelling from Black Hawk helicopters in a military-style assault on an apartment building in a major American city, an operation that reportedly included zip-tying children? Second, what happened to the $50,000 in taxpayer or campaign funds allegedly paid to an individual who later became a senior White House advisor? Money transferred with the explicit expectation that he would steer lucrative government contracts once inside the administration. Third, on whose authority and under what legal theory did the Justice Department issue a classified opinion authorizing the destruction of vessels in the Caribbean? These were not partisan gotchas. These were the exact questions the framers had in mind when they wrote Article I. Pam Bondi's response to each was identical. 0 substantive answers, followed immediately by pre-written, rehearsed, venomous personal attacks on the senators who dared ask. She did not engage the premise, did not cite statute, did not invoke executive privilege, did not even plead the need for a closed session. She simply insulted the questioners, attacking their motives, their records, their character, as if contempt itself were a sufficient substitute for transparency. The attacks were so clearly prepared in advance that it was impossible to see them as spontaneous. They were weapons loaded and aimed long before the hearing began. Adam Schiff, the junior-most Democrat on the committee and therefore the last to speak, took the floor and laid out the stakes with devastating clarity. If a cabinet nominee can transform a confirmation hearing into a public character assassination of United States senators, rather than defend the legality of the actions under scrutiny, then congressional oversight is finished. The moment a witness believes she can replace answers with insults and suffer no consequence, the executive branch has effectively declared itself above the legislature. Checks and balances do not die in a single dramatic coup. They die in moments precisely like this, moments when power learns it can sneer at questions instead of answering them. Schiff appealed directly to the Republican chairman, Senator Chuck Grassley, a man he openly praised for personal fairness in private dealings, begging him to enforce basic decorum and to co-sign written questions, so the nominee could not continue to dodge in public. Grassley's reply was chilling in its resignation. Instead of condemning Bondi's behavior, he pointed to a previous hearing where Democrats had been loud and confrontational with the FBI director and essentially said, "You set the tone last time, so what did you expect?" It was the moral equivalent of a shrug, an admission that the Senate standards had already collapsed so far that insults from a cabinet nominee were just Tuesday. Schiff refused to let the equivalent stand. Being loud is not the same as being contemptuous. Raising your voice is not the same as refusing to acknowledge the legitimacy of congressional inquiry itself. What Bondi did was not heated advocacy. It was a calculated demonstration that the Trump administration and its allies no longer feel obligated to justify their actions to anyone. They have internalized the lesson of the last 4 years. If you demonize the questioner, you never have to answer the question in a few measured minutes. Adam Schiff did something far more important than defend his colleagues. He drew a bright red line in the sand of a chamber that has seen too many lines erased. He warned that if this becomes the new template, if future cabinet officials learn they can arrive with folders full of pre-written character assaults and leave without ever addressing the substance of oversight, then the Senate will have voluntarily surrendered its Article 1 powers. The executive will no longer be checked. It will be unchallenged. And democracy does not collapse with tanks in the streets. It collapses when the people's representatives are told, in public and on live television, that their questions are an annoyance to be mocked rather than a constitutional duty to be honored. Pam Bondi may have thought she was scoring points with a certain audience by refusing to engage and choosing insults instead, but history will record her performance as the moment a nominee openly declared war on the very concept of accountability. And Chairman Grassley's refusal to intervene will be remembered as the moment a senior senator decided that protecting decorum was less important than protecting his party's nominee. Adam Schiff's intervention was not partisan whining. It was one of the clearest articulations in recent memory of what is at stake when oversight dies. If senators can be personally attacked for asking whether children were zip-tied during military raids on American soil, for asking where $50,000 of influence money disappeared, for asking who authorized blowing up ships in international waters, if those questions can be met with mockery instead of answers, then the American experiment is no longer a republic of laws but a reality show where the loudest, rudest, most defiant contestant wins and everyone else is expected to applaud. This is the new political reality we face. Basic decency, minimal respect, and the simple requirement that those who wield power explain themselves have become partisan issues. Adam Schiff stood up and said in essence, "Not on my watch." He reminded every American watching that if the Senate allows this template to stand, the executive branch will never again be held on a leash. Power will not just be unchecked. It will be openly contemptuous of the very idea that it should ever have to answer to the people's representatives. That is why what happened in that hearing room matters far beyond Pam Bondi or Adam Schiff or even this administration. It is a warning light flashing red on the dashboard of American democracy. When a cabinet nominee can insult United States senators instead of justifying potentially illegal actions, and when the chairman of the committee shrugs and says both sides do it, we are watching the slow, deliberate dismantling of the last guardrails that separate constitutional government from raw, unaccountable power. Schiff's words were not the complaint of a sore loser. They were the last best hope that someone, somewhere in the United States Senate, still believes that truth, accountability, and the simple dignity of asking questions deserve to be defended, even when it is uncomfortable, even when it is politically costly, even when the cameras are rolling and the base is cheering for blood instead of answers.